And thanks to you at home for staying with us for the next hour. Once upon a time, Democrats said they wanted health reform passed before the August congressional recess last year. Then they said they wanted it passed by Thanksgiving. Then they said they wanted it passed by Christmas. Then they said they wanted it passed by New Year's. Then they said they wanted it passed by the State of the Union. And as of today, new deadline. Democratic Senator Tom Harkin announcing today, quote, "By the time Easter comes, we will fulfill Ted Kennedy's dream that health care is a right and not a privilege." So there you have it. Easter, April 4th. Mark your calendars. You might want to do it in pencil, though. Democrats are pledging to have health reform wrapped up in 5 weeks. And maybe this time they mean it, because maybe this time they have learned to stop waiting around for Republican votes. Republicans are making it easy for Democrats now by making it as clear as it can possibly be that no matter what, they are not voting for health reform. They're not even voting for their own ideas on health reform. In fact, they now believe that their own ideas on health reform are offensive and unconstitutional. They are now completely diametrically opposed to themselves. Take Republican Senator Chuck Grassley, please. Senator Grassley, the top Republican senator on health reform, during yesterday's summit with the president, said this.
The high cost of this bill comes from an unconstitutional mandate. It comes from the fact that for the first time in the 225-year history of the country, the federal government's telling you got to buy something.
The individual mandate, he says, is unconstitutional. The individual mandate is unconstitutional according to Senator Grassley. Right, Senator Grassley?
I believe that there is a bipartisan consensus to have individual mandates. I think individual mandates are more apt to be accepted by a vast majority of people in Congress.
The lead Republican senator on health reform, Senator Chuck Grassley, is diametrically opposed to his own position on health reform. Even if you wanted to compromise with this man, and why would you at this point? Where would you start? Which of his two faces would you talk to? When Senator Grassley endorsed the individual mandate in health care last year, it wasn't some misstatement on his part. It wasn't some trick question, some momentary lapse in understanding. It was consistent with his record on this issue over time. Way back in 1993, Chuck Grassley, along with 21 other senators, introduced their own health reform bill as an alternative to the Clinton administration's effort. On page 238 of the Republican bill, quote, individual mandate. In all caps. See it there? The Secretary shall specifically make recommendations under paragraph 1 regarding establishing a requirement that all eligible individuals obtain health coverage through enrollment with a qualified health plan. Senator Grassley was for the individual mandate before he was against it. He was for it in 1993. He was for it as recently as a few months ago. He was for it well into this current round of health reform negotiations. But now, Senator Grassley is not only against it, he thinks it's unconstitutional. He is diametrically opposed to himself. We called Senator Grassley's office today to find out which of the senator's two faces speaks for him now. So far, staff members for neither face have returned our calls. If the example of Senator Grassley's brave stand against himself is not enough to convince Democrats that there's really no point in waiting for Republicans, they've got to do health reform alone if they're doing it at all. If that's not enough, then consider that Republicans are just flat out admitting as much themselves now, point blank.
The American people want us to scrap this bill. They've said it loud. They've said it clear.
We know how they feel about it. This is not a close call.
Our country's too big, too complicated, too decentralized for Washington, a few of us here, just to write a few rules about remaking 17% of the economy all at once. That sort of thinking works in a classroom, but it doesn't work very well in our big, complicated country.
The country is too big. It's too complicated for us to do anything about this problem. That's the message from Republicans now. It's not a matter of subjective perception. It is rather an observable truth that Republicans have no sense of urgency whatsoever about there being anything wrong with health care. They have no desire to or understanding of how to try to fix it. Meanwhile, here's the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle today. Some face premium increases exceeding 75%. 75%. The insurer Blue Shield is now notifying some of its customers here in California that their rates could go up more than 75%. You'll recall that Anthem Blue Cross announced its plans to hike individual premium rates in this state by a whopping 39%. Well, now small businesses here are looking at 75% plus hikes. 75. And it's 56% rate hikes in Michigan. And it's 40% rate hikes in Virginia. And it's 23% rate hikes in Maine. Do you want to wait around for Chuck Grassley to find his third face? To find something else he said he's for in this field that he's now against? Do you want to wait around to hear more Republicans talk about how it's too hard to do anything about this? And besides, the system's great the way it is. Why are we waiting till Easter anyway? Is there any further reason to wait? Joining us now is Ezra Klein, staff writer for The Washington Post. Mr. Klein, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Good evening.
Ezra, I do not know if you are a betting guy, but if you were a betting guy, would you bet that we'd have health reform by Easter?
I have learned not to make bets about health care reform. The way I would answer that, and certainly not on the timing of it. The one thing about Easter, right, is it's a bit unclear what they're saying the deadline is for there. Reconciliation does take a little bit of time, so even if they really began it tomorrow in earnest, there are both a number of procedural obstacles in the process itself and more that Republicans can present by filling it up with amendments that could take a couple of weeks. So this won't be quick one way or the other, but I agree with you that Democrats need to get moving on it sooner than later.
Health insurance companies are playing in sort of unexpected role at this point in the politics. We know they're not stupid. We know they're very savvy both about business and politics. They must know that raising rates by these dramatic amounts right now can only help people who support reform. What does a 75% rate hike say about the state of the health insurance industry right now? What's going on here?
It says that this is what the business model is, right? I mean, so, okay, over here there's politics going on. They know that, and they don't want to get hurt in it, and they don't want to give anybody any fodder against them. But they don't think this is bad because for them it really isn't. It's what they have to do to survive, to have quarterly earning reports, right? What's going on with Anthem, with all of these groups, is that they find people and they give them insurance, and then it turns out those people are sicker than they thought. What happened with Anthem, right, is they said, well, what we were paying out in claims is more than we were taking in premiums. And the point now is that they got to get rid of those people who are giving them all those claims. And the people giving them those claims are people who are sick, who need health care. So what reform is there to do, right, is to give them an opportunity to compete as if they are not bad people, to give them an opportunity to compete by going on price and quality and not trying to find the healthiest people and drop the sickest people. But the fact that they're doing this now, the fact that they're raising rates in the middle of this process just goes to show how normal this is. How if we don't do health care reform, this will continue on all of the time forever.
And that's where what you just described right there is where the politics and the policy come together. I mean, politically, it is absolutely incredible to me to see Chuck Grassley, the top supposedly point guy in the Republican Senate on health reform, do this blatant 180 on the mandate. He's been on record supporting the mandate for almost 2 decades now. But even as he's realized that there might be better politics for him in being against the mandate, even he recognized until it became, he saw this new political imperative that had to be part of reform.
Chuck Grassley has a 2010 primary challenge. You see this happen with Chris. It happens to a lot of them. They're getting very good at it. It's worth going quickly to the individual mandate here. In 1993, this emerged as a Republican alternative because what Democrats wanted was an employer mandate. They wanted to make sure your business gave you health care insurance. And Republicans said, no, that's terrible. It's government interfering with the free market. We are going to do personal responsibility. We're going to put it on the individual. That's how we do things in this country. We're individualistic. And back then, Bill Clinton complained one day that every time you think you're compromising with the Republicans, they move the compromise further to the right. So here we are, 2010, saying, fine, no employer mandate, individual mandate, personal responsibility, we'll do it your way. Suddenly, individual mandate becomes not just a bad idea, but literally unconstitutional. Massachusetts, where Scott Brown is from, has an individual mandate. Scott Brown supports that individual mandate. He voted for the bill instituting it. Do people think he hates the Constitution? Is that the Republican Party's official position now?
Incredible. Ezra, during yesterday's summit, Republican Senator, it was Lamar Alexander, was the one who said this country is too big and too complicated to really try to reform health care. I sort of felt in looking at that if he didn't have enough time to watch all 7.5 hours of the summit, that was like the crystalline moment in the summit. This is hard. We really don't want to do it. Stop asking us about which different way we could do it or which way we're willing to go along with doing it. We're just not interested in doing it.
You know, the Republicans have found a lot of very large philosophical objections for why not to do this bill. I spoke to Senator Alexander about this point a couple weeks ago. He's very eloquent on it. He's thought very hard about it. But the fact remains that he was a co-sponsor of Wyden and Bennett, which was a much bigger bill. The fact remains that he was part of the folks who passed Medicare Part D, which was comprehensive. But then when Barack Obama and the Democrats are trying to pass a health care bill, suddenly people in the Republican Party realize, well, you know what? We don't do comprehensive well. And what you've seen is not them saying, you don't have a good bill here, and here's a better way to achieve these goals. What you've seen is them saying, we shouldn't do this. Not this bill, but this problem. That when you're in power, at the very least, problems should not be solved, large legislation should not be written. And that's in some ways a very smart move if you don't want to compromise, right? Because what Republicans have done is create a scenario in which what is ideologically extreme about what Democrats are doing is attempting to solve a problem. And there's certainly no available compromise.